What's going on YouTube? This is Lagardi of Lagardi's Hats coming to you guys from JJ Hat Center with the brand new episode 3 of Hat Masters, our weekly series where we get together and we discuss all things hat. Now, if you guys joined me last week, the main discussion point was the care and the maintenance of your felt hat. Right? The different things that you can use at home, as well as different things that you can find on the market to make sure that your hat is in tip-top shape. We went over hat cleaning, and we went over all the different tools and materials that you can use to make sure that you get the best result when cleaning your hat. We went over things like brushes, different kinds of sponges, and our good old-fashioned tape. A little bit of tape from a tape gun or a lint roller, a good old adhesive strip. We went over the different kinds of things that you can use to remove dirt and debris from the body of your felt, right? So this week we're gonna switch it up and go into something a little different, but relatively similar to what we talked about, right? This week we're gonna be focusing on the different types of felt material that exist out there. Now, felt is generally used to make wintertime hats. You don't find very many summertime hats that are made of felt. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do it, because as far as the cowboys are concerned, you know what I'm saying, you can wear your felt hat in any season. It doesn't necessarily have to be winter. But in this particular case, we're going to be discussing the different types of hats that the different types of materials that the hats are made of for the winter season specifically. As we are here in New York, it gets a little cold, especially around the times between, right around the end of October, clean until about the end of March into April. It gets really, really chilly. So you want to make sure you have the proper kind of hat on your head so you're not wondering why your scalp is cold. There's a lot of times when I'm on the subway and I see people wearing a straw or a very lightweight hat, a cloth hat, and it's like 10 degrees outside, and I can't figure out what the hell is going on. But with my help, you guys hopefully won't be making that mistake. Want to make sure you keep your heads warm in the winter and cool in the summer, all right? So one of the first things that I'm going to talk about is the different types of felt that exist out there. So the first one that I'm going to start with, and the most general across the board, will probably be wool. Now, wool can be made into a myriad of different winter-based items. Everybody loves a little wool on their body, except maybe if you're allergic to it. Everybody loves a little wool on their body for the winter to keep the warmth and to keep the insulation going. So there are a lot of different applications that you can use wool for. One of the biggest applications in our specific aspect would be to create felt hats, right? So I'm going to pull one of the pieces here that I have, and I'm going to introduce you to one of the pieces that we carry here at the store. This is the Outback here, and this guy is made of wool. Now, there are different types of wool out there, some of higher qualities than others, right? You have things like your standard wool, right? And then you have something like this, which is a tiny little bit better, right? This is called light felt. Light felt is going to be it's gonna be super wool. It's gonna look a little nicer. It's right up there with merino wool. I'm sure you guys are familiar with merino wool. It's right up there with merino wool, but it's not gonna be nearly as nice and as elegant as merino wool. This is still functionable wool. Now, there are a lot of benefits to your hat being made of wool other than warmth, right? So with a wool hat like this, generally there won't be a lining, and more time than not, there will be a cloth sweatband. Why do you ask? Because a lot of wool hats, especially light felt hats, have the ability to be quote unquote rolled up, crushed, right? And then they will always bounce back because these wool pieces, they're very, very resistant. They have a nice elasticity to them in a sense. They are all machine pressed, right? So no matter what shape it ends up in, right, once you pop it out, it will pop out into its proper shape, right? So a lot of the times the wool hats give you that advantage of crushability, right? And I say crushability on air quotes. You know what, let me stop here and kind of address that, right? There are a lot of different hats that can be interpreted as crushable, but not all hats are crushable. You see, right? There are a lot of things that you need from a hat before you can deem it crushable. One of the things is no leather band and no lining, right? For as flexible as a hat can be, crushable doesn't necessarily have to be it. More time than not, right? My personal opinion is to advise not to crush anything but wool, right? While rabbit and beaver are substantially better materials as far as quality goes, right? You don't necessarily want to be taking an all rabbit, or for that matter, an all beaver hat and crushing it to the degree that you can take this and crush it to. Like, I can mangle this, I can grab this and, you know, and with a little bit of steam, and sometimes not even, just a little bit of reshaping, the hat comes back looking just the same, right? So these hats have a good toughness to them and a good dependability and reliability, right? So not all hats are crushable, ladies and gentlemen. Do not attempt to crush a hat just because you think it's crushable. I don't care what nobody says, right? A crushable hat has to have these specific qualities to it. And, you know, in my personal opinion, it should be at a higher quality wool. Regular wool, I personally don't like to crush because you see the indentations a lot sooner. So you might wind up having to buy a hat a whole hell of a lot sooner too, right? With wool pieces, though the cost of the hat is down, right? For most wool pieces, you're looking at about $85, clean into the 200s, right? Depending on the type of wool, depending on how big the piece is, how big the specific fedora is. There's going to be a lot of different ways and things you can apply to it. So when it comes down to the crushability of things, you want to make sure you have a higher quality wool. Regular wool, regular standard wool, non-light felt is not going to hold up too well over time, and you might wind up having to buy 2, 3, or 4 hats in a span in a lifetime that you would only buy one felt fedora, fur felt fedora. We'll get to that in just a moment, right? So there are things like wool for standard wool felt, light felt, light wool felt. There's merino wool, which a lot of berets, good berets anyway, are typically made out of. I don't see very many merino wool fedora pieces, so it's a little bit rare. They use it for other applications. So the merino wool is generally used for more luxurious items. And then you have another item, which is relatively similar, is the impermeable wool. Now, when it comes to water resistancy, right, I'm not a fan of taking your hat and getting it wet at all. Unless it's in the Kubra, then go ahead, go in the rain, go jump in the pool. You'll be fine. But any other hat, I'm a little leery about, right? Anything that's not a heavy Western weight, and even then I'm a little leery of that too. But anything that's not a heavy Western weight, I generally tend to advise to stay away from the rain. Carry your umbrella anyway. If you happen to get wet, fine. But don't put yourself in front of the bull to get the horns. You know, maybe that reference made sense, maybe it didn't. But nonetheless, you don't want to put yourself and your hat in harm's way, right? You don't want to end up with a soggy hat, because then the water's going to be in the hat, and it's going to get on your head, and it's going to be cold, and you're going to get a cold, and you're going to go to the subway and get the cold to other people. You don't want to do that. There's a lot of germs being passed around. So you see how one soggy, wet hat can ultimately destroy the universe, guys. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you want to make sure that you carry your umbrella anyway. This is impermeable wool, however, right? Impermeable wool is the closest thing you have to a proper rain hat while still maintaining its felty goodness, right? Impermeable wool is going to be wool that's very, very water resistant. In fact, has been treated for water resistancy. So impermeable wool is really, really good. It's another type of wool that's out there, guys. And like I said, wool is one of the most general materials that you can use to make hats. So there's going to be tons of items and tons of different kinds of wools and applications for wool. So wool has a lot of advantages: crushability, flexibility. Some wool is impermeable. Most wool is crushable. So there are a lot of things there. And by all means, your wallet doesn't take a hit. So the wool hats are wallet resistant, wallet destroying resistant. Yeah, it ain't the kryptonite to your wallet like some of these other pieces might be. And just because it's a wool hat does not mean it's not a good hat. What defines a good hat is how well it functions to what it's supposed to do, right? So if this impermeable wool by McGill, for instance, really holds up to what it's suggesting. You can take this hat out in the rain, and once again, it has the same flexibility and reliability as the other hat, but with an added bonus, right? There's a slight difference in this one, is that there is a lining on the inside, right? Since they're expecting you to be out there in the rain a little bit, there's lining. It doesn't help to push the moisture out or push the moisture back, because the moisture shouldn't be getting in anyway. But should your hat get a little wet and it gets a little colder, the lining here will help insulate and help keep your head warm. So that's one of the aspects of a lining. I think I might have mentioned that in the last video, but if not, I just mentioned it in this video. So yeah, this one has a lining on it. So there are various different ways. And as far as those rules that I mentioned, Captain Jack said. It just, rules are more like guidelines, you know? So keep these things in mind. Well, it's not set in stone, of course. And you want to make sure that you want to make sure you handle your hat the right way. And knowing what material is made out of is one of the most important things to note in the way you handle your hat. So let's move on to the next kind of felt that you can have. So remember, guys, regular wool, light felt, impermeable, regular wool, light felt wool, impermeable wool, and then merino wool for berets and things of that nature. So let's move this out of our way for now. And we're going to move forward to the next piece of felt, or the next felt hat that we have on hand, right? The next piece that I'm going to take your attention to is your standard all rabbit felt piece. There are a lot of different things that you can do to substitute fur felt if that's not your fancy. So respect to all those who are non-fur wearers, and respect to all those who appreciate the felt and the fur. There are no differences here. There are no factions here. We love everything, and you know, as long as something has an application, as long as you're using it for something instead of wasting it, I think it's all good with the universe. It's going to a greater purpose. Now that I'm done with that little disclaimer, this is your standard rabbit fur felt piece. More time than not made of wild hair, right? And then used similar applications to the hats that we saw before, but a little bit different. Now, rabbit fur felt generally yields a higher price point. For something like this, we're looking at about maybe the 200s into the 3-somethings, right? So that takes you up a notch, but you get a lot of advantages from the rabbit piece that you didn't get from the piece previous, which was the wool, right? With the rabbit piece, you get natural water. You get your first level of natural water resistance is what I should really say. It's not, once again, don't take no hats out in the water, don't take no hats out in the rain. I will probably reiterate that statement a few more times in this video, so prepare yourself. Do not do it, it's not a good idea. But it's your first level of water resistance, natural water resistance, without any chemicals or any products sprayed on there to treat it, right? This is going to be more time than not what most dress hats are made out of. Dress hats oftentimes aren't made of wool. The wool is generally, it has a bit of a tooth to it, and it has a bit of a texture to it that kind of dissipates slowly but surely as you get into the higher grades of hats. So when it comes down to the rabbit piece, right, as you can see here, there's a lot of smoothness to it. There's not too much texture versus the wool piece. I'm going to bring it back one more time. This has a lot more texture, significantly noticeable texture, as well as a significant difference in the thickness of the felt. I don't see wool felt very thin oftentimes. I don't know why. I'm sure there's a scientific reason behind it, but I just haven't bumped into that reason yet. But it cannot be as thin as this. So more time than not, this is called dress weight, when the felt is a little bit, the felt is not as thick as the wool felt here. But they can get thick, like that, you know what I'm saying? They can get very, very thick, especially when you're applying it for things like Western hats. Western hats are often made much thicker and stiffened so that they have a lot more retention for the shapes. The shape doesn't move around and bend on you, right? So a lot of the times dress hats are going to be made of this fur felt here, and that's what you really want to go with, right? Because the fur felt, above the fact that it feels a lot nicer and looks a lot nicer, it's going to last you a lot longer, right? Back in the day when they were making felt hats, right? Just your basic generic hat. I don't know if it was a little mercury they might have been putting in the hat or something, but the hats are built like tanks. Everything down to your basic rabbit fur felt hat that was made back then will probably be able to survive up till now, give or take oxidation in the sweatband and little things, little cosmetic things like oxidation in the sweatband, little oxidation on the lining there. But other than that, more time than not, anything that was made back then, especially with fur felt, is going to be top notch. That doesn't mean the felt these days are whack. They just not doing it the way they were doing it back then. Like I said, I don't think mercury is as legal and as accessible as it was back then. You know, Mad Hatter syndrome and all that. So more time than not, this hat's gonna last you 10, 15 years, especially if you're meticulous about taking care of it, or even slightly meticulous. Just bring it into your local hat man and your hat will last you forever. That's what we're here for. Sometimes we even bring hats back to life. So nonetheless, this hat's gonna last you 10, 15 years versus something like the wool. If you're meticulous about it, you'll squeeze 5 years out of it. And this is pure honesty. You'll squeeze about 5 years out of it. But if you're wishy-washy and not really like, you just grab your hat and go, and you're on that type of time with your wool piece, you're gonna definitely need another 1 to 2 seasons. And I say seasons because I can't even necessarily give it a whole year, right? Wool is good, but wool is not as durable and as long lasting, especially in the aesthetic department, as the fur felt ultimately is. The fur felt pieces also, oftentimes they're stiffened a little bit. There are a lot of softer pieces like that. They have crushable fur felt, but once again, you're talking about a $200 to $300 hat. Do you really want to be crushing your $200 to $300 hat? More time than not, the answer is no. If you got it like that, you got it like that. But besides the money aspect of it, my theory in all this stays the same. The more you crush your hat, the uglier it looks. And then the hat man can't do nothing for you past that point. I can't bring that hat back to life because it's done up, because you done twisted and rolled it a few times. You remember, just pinching your brim here, just pinching your crown here to grab your hat puts a hole in your hat. What do you think happens when you take a hat and twist it a few times? Nonetheless, I don't want to think about all that nightmare fuel. This is your traditional rabbit fur felt hat. We'll get back to this. Dress hats are, more time than not made of this material. Good for heat. It retains as much heat as a wool felt does. Wool felt technically would be a slight bit warmer because wool felt is like wearing a peacoat on your head. So it's going to be a slight bit warmer, but with the combination of the lining here as well as the leather band, which doesn't let too much heat seep out, especially if the hat fits you, you retain tons of heat inside of your hat. So your head will never be warm. A lot of the times in the winter, if it's not too cold and I wear my hat, my fur felt hat with the leather band, kind of got a little sweat going on underneath. So beware, guys. So not as much flexibility and crushability as the wool hat, and certainly not as durable in a sense of like rolling it up as a wool hat could be. But nonetheless, this is where the elegance begins, right? This is, you should have your wool piece, but you should also have this piece as well. This piece is going to, this is what you take to go out. This is what you take to go to the office. There's a wide range of different applications that you could have for your fur felt hat. It looks better aesthetically, hands down. You see it. You don't really got to go too far and look too far to notice the difference between the two pieces. So that is your introductory to rabbit fur felt. Yeah, man, rabbit fur felt, wool fur felt, right? Let me move this out of the way. Does wool count as fur felt? Can I just simply call it wool felt? Nonetheless, we're going to be moving on to the next stage, and this is where the big boys start to play, right? The next material that I'm going to introduce you to is actually something just really, really, really cool. When I discovered that, the higher grade hats were made of this, I was just like, oh damn, here we are thinking that these guys just like, build dams, eat trees, and things like that. But there are a lot of different applications what you do with beaver fur. So with that slight awkward introduction, beaver fur, ladies and gentlemen, beaver fur is going to be the creme de la creme, or at least if it's not, it's going to be the doorway to the creme de la creme, because the beaver felt is what everything that I described about rabbit, and it takes a few things, it takes a few pointers from the wool felt as well in that, that flexibility. It's going to be everything that I told you about the rabbit times 10. So if light felt was the super hat and fur felt was the super duper hat, this is the super duper duper hat. There we go. You thought I was going to say something creative. This is going to be everything that rabbit does and more. It adds an extra layer of elegance that you can, when you're looking at first glance, you can't really see and notice everything that I'm talking about here. But when you come into the store, when you go into any hat shop around the country, ask them to touch the beaver. You may not want, ask them to touch the beaver. You may not want to buy the beaver. Ask them to touch the beaver. Touching the beaver don't hurt, right? because then you'll notice the vast difference in how it feels, right? For whatever reason, right? I couldn't begin to tell you, or maybe one of these days I will. I'll dive into full detail into how these things are made and bring that to you in a compact bite. So the material on this seems a lot more abundant, but also a lot more like a lot more felted. There are a lot the fibers in this are just they're in much more closer proximity. I might be crazy, but you probably couldn't tell this without a microscope, but nonetheless, you feel the difference. It has a much more velvety feel than the rabbit does. The rabbit has its own texture to it, and it's not hard nor is it soft. It's its own texture, but then the beaver has that softness and that it just, you rub your hand across and it just glides, right? And then, like I said, it takes a little bit in the sense that it can be flexible, but once again, don't be crushing no goddamn beaver hat. Beaver hats start at about $450 and go clean into the 700, 800, 900s. And if you go into the realms of Optimo hats over in Chicago, shouts to them. I'm gonna come see y'all soon. You're looking at about an $800 hat and more. So Beaver is like I said, it's the doorway to the creme de la creme. A pure Beaver is generally used in the higher end hats across the board. Like I mentioned Optimo a second ago, I believe most of their pieces, if not all of their pieces, are Beaver Felt. So 100% pure Beaver ensures that you have an elegant hat, like I said, that does everything that we just mentioned across the board and kind of combines elements from the two to bring you a very, very nice hat. And dig this, right? A beaver hat is one of the only hats that I feel relatively comfortable saying that it has enough natural water resistancy to take in the rain and be fine. I've seen beaver hats come in here wrecked, right? But as soon as you put a little steam on it, it immediately cooperates with the steam and it rises your hat from the damn grave and brings it back to life in a way that none of the other materials, it don't do that. Like sometimes rabbit depends on the material, you know what I'm saying, depends on the maker. The rabbit can be a little tough when you're hitting it with the steam. It don't cooperate at first. It takes like 2, 3, 4 seconds before cooperate. This one is 0 to 60 in 1.1, baby. Like it, as soon as it touches the steam, it opens up and it welcomes the ability to reshape this hat to your heart's content without the fear that there's going to be tons of indents into it, because it's soft enough that it just, you can manipulate this in ways you can't really do, especially with wool felt. You can't really do this with wool felt at all. Wool felt, if it's like that, it's going to look like that forever. Slight differences, but this allows so much flexibility. So if I want a teardrop, if I want a center crease, I just do that right there. If I want the teardrop, I take my center crease and I open it up a little bit, right? And I add that shape into it, and it's just taking it. I ain't even use no damn steam. You know what I'm saying? So if I sound like I am excited about this is a loose teardrop. If I sound like I'm excited about this, it's because I am, because this is one of the highest levels that you can get. Is it worth paying that much money? Absolutely, especially if you're a person that wears hats. It's a clean investment for yourself, because that will be the hat that you take on special dates or to meet the parents or whatever kind of important activity that you need to do. This is what this is the luxury, material for a high-end hat. So when it comes to Beaver, there's nothing like it, right? There's nothing like it down lower. But of course, like all good things in this world, there are things that are bigger, better, and badder than what we are introduced here to. But let me enjoy the Beaver for a little bit longer, guys. So beavers are naturally water resistant due to what the animal naturally does for its downtime, or maybe it's not downtime, maybe that's a job for them. Nonetheless, the beavers are naturally water resistant, so this is one of the only hats I feel really comfortable being in the rain, not staying out in the rain, of course, and getting waterlogged, but knowing that if it got wet to a greater degree, it would definitely survive, hands down, and be okay. Just bring it into your local hatter, blast it with the almighty steamer, and it comes right back to life, ladies and gentlemen. So Beaver, in my personal opinion, don't go out there and just start buying Beaver hats, right? Having a hat that's good does not diminish all the hats below, because it doesn't have the crazy flexibility and the crushability that the wool hat does. It could never have that. It doesn't have the kind of the you know, when it comes down to stiffening the brim and making sure your brim doesn't move out of place. You can stiffen a beaver hat, but why? Why are you trying? It's just naturally soft. Why would you want to stiffen it, right? So it doesn't have the ability to make sure that your brim is staying stiff, and especially if you're a flat brim wearer, it's staying flat across the board without a little bit of fold and without a little bit of bend, because oftentimes beaver is very, very thin, but because of, you know, like the material just seems like it's so robust in its contents, the contents of the material, that even though it's very thin, it also carries it, you know, like the wind is not going to send your hat flapping on your face because it holds itself up. It's crazy, man. You really gotta like feel it to know what I'm talking about. I hope I'm doing a good job describing this to you, because it's everything that I'm saying it is. I ain't trying to sell you no beaver. What I'm letting you know is that if you're looking for the best of the best, or the entry grade to the best of the best, beaver is where you want to start. But start with your wool. Learn how to take care of your hat. Bump up to the rabbit. Learn how to take care of a better hat. Learn the maintenance things that come with taking care of a rabbit hat. And then when you're ready and you've been hat collecting for a little while, get your first beaver, man. Go to somebody good though, because you don't want to spend your money, either get it custom made, or if you're gonna go spend your money with somebody good, somebody really good, like us. Yeah. So from here, we're gonna move on to the tippy top of the pile, the cherry on top. There's something better than beaver, LG? Yes, there's something better than beaver, and it's also gonna help us transition into another part of this, right? So the next thing we're gonna bump up to, we're gonna take our hat, we're gonna put it here. The next material that we're gonna bump up to is something that we personally carry here at the shop. This is our #1 hat. This is the hat that breaks all the molds. Unfortunately, since the pandemic, we haven't been able to get our hands on some. The panoramic, excuse me. We haven't been able to get our hands on some, but it's going to be the beaver mink. Beaver mink, the aspect of mixing beaver material and mink together to make an absolutely luxurious masterpiece. If you thought the regular beaver was soft before, this takes that, throws a whole bunch of baby oil on it, and then what makes things tough? I don't know. This thing just melts in your hand as you're holding on to it. It feels amazing. It looks amazing. The felt content is absolutely rich. One thing I didn't mention before is that in comparison to rabbit hat, oftentimes the saturation in the hat seems to pop more on the beaver. I don't know what that's about, but maybe they use a little more dye. I don't know what the case is, but if you take a beaver hat of the same color and a rabbit hat of the same color, there will be a vast difference. You're talking about black versus jet black, right? So in regards to this, the beaver mink is going to be the tippy top of the mountain, especially for us here at JJ's. This is our Valencia model that we've carried here for years, right? And this thing is absolutely gorgeous. I hope we can get our hands on some for the upcoming fall season, man, because everybody seems to be waiting for this. We had them for a while, and then we didn't have them anymore, especially after we weren't able to get some from over there from Europe, man. It's still, things are still a little rough, right? The world looks okay, but it's really not. Big old Band-Aid on top of it. Anyway, so this is the beaver mink. It takes everything that the beaver has and it bumps it up another 10 notches, right? And this is it, man. This is the creme de la creme, the top of the mountain, right? This is the hat that your hat wants to wear. You know what I'm saying? Like this is the hat of the gods, right? And beaver mink is cool because, like I said, it takes two different materials, blends them together to create something that's you thought the beaver was crazy, and then the beaver mink comes along. You're just like, well, right? But what that helps me transition to is, while I mentioned all of those different materials separately, there are also blends that kind of take little elements from one thing and moves it to the next thing and cohesively creates an absolute magnificent piece. For instance, if you take a little bit of a wool felt and you blend it with rabbit felt, that flexibility and that toughness carries over across the board. So the wool and rabbit blends are very, very tough hats. A lot of the hats that we've sold here in the past that are blends, I ain't gonna hold you, sometimes they be seeming like they go a little harder and last a little longer than the separate pieces involved in making the hat. So I haven't seen that too many times, right? And then you could even go as far as like mixing a rabbit hat, right? For the toughness of it, like this here, this is a rabbit And this is a rabbit and beaver blend. This is the San Sebastian. We had this a few years back. And this hat, man, Lord, hat gods, send more hats. Shout outs to Fernandez de Rocher. This is the factory it's coming out of. Send more hats, ladies and gentlemen, because this thing is awesome, and I think that bringing this back will take us over the moon. I'm gonna let you guys observe it with my beautiful telescope teardrop crown, which you guys know all about soon. But yeah, man, this is a rabbit and beaver blend. What does that do? It makes the hat tough so that it can stay stiff in the sense of keeping the brim nice and flat, but it also provides that nice softness and elegance and richness in the color. Like, the color saturation on this is fucking crazy, excuse my language, is intense, right? So it keeps the saturation intact while keeping the hat soft, as well as providing a base, a heavier base, so that when the hat is stiffened, if the hat is stiffened, it stays in the exact position that it's in. Also, the binding on the edge definitely helps stabilize the hat, keep it in shape. So you can blend these different materials to kind of, in different levels and different percentages, to get the results you want from your hat as a hat maker, right? So, you know, don't be afraid to experiment. And at the end of the day, right, what it does is also reduces the price. So you take the higher price and you kind of like take a few bars off, keeping the lower price in mind. So it's a great deal across the board. So blending the different materials together will give you some of the best results you've ever seen. It's like you're taking the best elements from the individual respective hat and plugging it into a brand new amalgamation of everything that's good about both of those hats. So back to the topic at hand, the creme de la creme. I don't even have to spend too much time talking about this thing, because the hat defines itself, right? Once again, it's one of those things, you got to be here, you got to feel it to know what I'm really talking about. But look at this, ladies and gentlemen. This hat is gorgeous. It's on the levels of, well, I can't really say it. That's going, I can't shout them out just yet. Until I visit them, I can't shout them out just yet, right? So once we do that, we're gonna come back. Future me is gonna come back and jump into this video, right? So yeah, man, you blending your materials together gives you one of the craziest effects that you can have, right? And when you're blending super high-end materials like beaver and mink, you get an absolute masterpiece, ladies and gentlemen. So this in itself will conclude this portion of the video, right? But I got something special planned for you guys, right? I'm gonna do something a little different this week. We're not just gonna, we're gonna end a little early, right? Because I gotta show you guys a little something. January 14th, we decided to host our very first JJ Hat Center Hat Conference right here in this very spot at the hat shop. And we invited a whole myriad of people to come by and kind of share and bask in the glory that is the hat community with us, right? We wanted to give you guys a hub, a place where all the hatters are welcomed, right? It's my goal that one day that all people walking up and down the street will have a hat on their head for one reason or another. I don't care where you purchase it from, but I want you guys to know that JJ Hat Center will be a hub for all hatters and all things related to hats. So we decided to throw this JJ Hat Center Hat Conference here at the shop. It was, dare I say, if success had a greater version of itself as a word, it would be that. It was an absolute ball. It was a magnificent time. We had a whole bunch of cool stuff going, right? A ton of our patrons and customers decided to pull up and come chill with us, come hang out with us. We had our friends over at Glen Rothis pull up and do a little whiskey tasting, man. They had different years of whiskey. We had the 12, we had the 18, we had the 25. We didn't really have the 25, but I wish we had the 25. But the 25 was given away as one of our raffle gifts. Our raffle went sick, man. There were people winning tons of different prizes. And hell, I'm a big fan of everybody's a winner. So even if you didn't win one of the big prizes, I made sure that everybody had something to go home with to remember us by, right? One of these beautiful scarves that we got here at the shop. I made sure everybody that came to the mix got a chance to either get one of these scarves, or we definitely made sure we gave out a couple, discount coupons along the way, man. So it was an absolutely magnificent time, and thankfully we have a little video put together that is a compilation of everything that happened that night, all the beautiful faces, all the happy, beautiful faces that were in the shop and all the cool events that we had going on here. So without further ado, guys, let's get to the video. Let me show y'all what the JJ Hat Conference is all about. This is LaGuardia of LaGuardia's Hats. And welcome to the JJ Hat Center Hat Conference. Amazing time. Did you guys see all that cool stuff that was going on? We had whiskey tasting, we had live music, we had raffles, we had a whole bunch of cool stuff going on, and most of all, a lot of the hat community, especially the ones that shop here at JJ's, got to meet each other for the first time. We had a lot of influencers come up into the shop, as well as your regular average hat wearers. We made sure that everybody had a way to connect with each other, and that was the absolute most beautiful part about the event. Bringing all of the crazy mad hatters across the city together for the very first time under one roof to love and appreciate the one thing that they can't go without, which is their fedoras. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for joining me for episode 3 of Hat Masters over here at JJ Hat Centers. I appreciate you guys for supporting, for liking, for subscribing, and for keeping up with me across YouTube, over to Instagram, and across all of the other social medias that I and JJ Hat Centers are associated with. Thank you guys, thank you, and let's make another JJ Hat Center Hat Conference happen again. My goal is to maybe aim for the summer so we can bring in the summer season the right way, have another hat conference here to discuss all of the summer pieces and all the pieces moving forward. So once again, guys, thank you guys for joining me for Hat Masters episode 3.